Welcome everybody to March's Dr. NAACLS. I know we're all pretty busy trying to get work done before CLEC next week, whether you're attending virtually or in person. So I appreciate you taking the time for joining us today. So for those of you who have seen a Dr. NAACLS before, you're very common with this next part. We timestamp these Dr. NAACLS episodes because we make them available to watch on demand on our blog and our YouTube page. So, but since our compliance documents can change up to twice a year, we don't want people to maybe be misled of what some of the finer details of standard compliance are, since those could change. So the reason I mention all of this is to say, if you're watching this down the road, please double check that our website for our standard compliance guide. Or if you have compliance questions, you can email or call staff or contact a discipline lead person, which we will get to our DLPs a little bit later. Okay, today's team will be talking about progress reports, interim reports, and a little preview at CLEC is our content expert, RCAP member Dale Telgenhoff, and then we have two staff members today, Russell DeCalliway, who's a program accreditation coordinator, excuse me, and my name is Mark Spence. I'm a program approval coordinator. I work with phlebotomy and clinical assistant and also DCLS programs. So before we get into the details of the progress report or the site visit, or the interim report, the one thing both of these reports have in common are they come from the award you receive after you complete your review process. So you've been through the self-study, you've been through the site visit, you've been notified by NAACLS of the recommendation that the review committee is advancing to the board of directors. And then finally, you receive your program award. And there is a lot of informative materials on that program award, whether you have a progress report or an interim report coming up or not. So let's take a look at the program award. What you're seeing on your left probably looks a little different than what you're used to seeing. NAACLS is starting after this upcoming meeting, which is the April meeting. We are reformatting our recommendations and our program awards a little bit, just so there's easy access to when your program has your next award due and the date of your end accreditation date. So you don't have to, in the past, we would tell you you had 10 years, and we'll kind of look at those, the comparison between the documents in a little bit. But in the past, we'd tell you you got 10 years or 5 years, and then you probably have to do math and things of that nature. This way, we're just gonna be a lot more clear about it and a lot more upfront about when your next report is due and when your end accreditation date is. So, but all the other items on the program award remain the same. So let's look at kind of the due dates a little bit. What you see on the top is how we are going to format things moving forward, and what you see at the bottom is kind of what we were doing in the past. So as you see, even if you have an award that may be 1 to 5, 7 years old, you still have the relevant dates in there, especially if you have had a progress report due or a 5-year interim report. And those awards come with a cover letter that will notify you about when your notification of renewal should be coming and when your self-study should be coming. But we've kind of condensed that information so you don't have to search for all of it. Okay, now that kind of that administrative items are aside, let's start with the interim report. So interim reports are for continuing accredited programs that have received the maximum 10 years of maximum award. And this report is due about halfway through your program's award. And it's really just NAACLS following up with items of standard 2, because we're always requiring programs to self-assess and also continually improve themselves. So we want to kind of touch base and see how those items are going. So now I'm going to hand it off to Dale for a little bit. Dale, as a member of RCAP, has reviewed these reports as they've come in. So Dale, can you share some of your experiences kind of reviewing your interim reports, maybe noticing how what works when programs put these things together, or maybe some items where programs trip up?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mark. Yeah, the interim report I think is very valuable in assessing your program and just keeping that in mind that you had the self-study, you had the site visit, and then you're not just forgotten about for 10 years. It's just a way to check back in and make sure that we're seeing that you're adhering to these standards, and specifically, as Mark pointed out, standard 2. So standard 2 deals a lot with program assessment. And the concept behind program assessment is that any program can always be better. You might have 100% pass rates and 100% job placement and 100% graduation once they start the second half of the program. And that's great. We want to see that, in your thing. And even if it's not those numbers, that's fine too. Things happen. But we also want to see that, you're looking into, what can we do better? What is there something that either our graduates of our program are saying, or the employers that hire our program graduates are saying? So a really critical part of that interim report is making sure you have those surveys from both the graduates and the employers. And sometimes, it's hard to get a hold of those people. They leave the college, they leave the university, and you never hear from them again in some cases. But a lot of them do go out and work in the same clinical sites that you're sending students to. So there is some interaction, there is some feedback. So in terms of, as Mark pointed out, what are some tripping points that we see on these progress reports? Generally, they're very good. They're easy to read through, and we have our own forms that we do on RCAP to assess the interim report and the progress reports. And so we just look through this checklist and we make sure that all those things are checked. And probably the biggest sticking point I see is when people don't have feedback from either graduates or employers of the graduates. So again, that's something that you can't go back and say, I contact you as an RCAP member and say, I'm getting ready to submit this report on your report. Do you have any of that feedback? And suddenly you don't have any and you're scrambling and what have you. If there's anything else missing, if your numbers aren't there, or they're not in the correct format, or, we can work through that. And it's not a black box. We contact you. I oftentimes will talk to program directors when I'm reviewing their interim reports just for clarification. And so some of those things are easily fixed, but when you don't have that feedback, when you don't have that assessment of that feedback, that can be a little trickier.
Okay, I'm going to expound on something Dale said, but I want to go back a little bit. So I kind of got caught up in explaining the change in dates, but I also wanted to point out that the language you saw on that blue slide comes directly from the program award. And that's probably maybe even more so than the due dates. The most important thing about the program award and why it is important that you always keep your program awards. And if you're transitioning away, you won the lottery, you're ready to get away from your job and you have a replacement coming, make sure you point to the replacement where these programs awards are. And the reason I'm bringing that up is we always, if you have a follow-up report to an award, we tell you exactly what that report must contain, whether it's a 5-year interim or a progress report in the award. So the language that you saw on that blue screen, that is copy and pasted directly from here. So again, we try really hard not to play gotcha with programs, especially once we are asking for progress reports and interim reports. So we're going to tell you exactly what we want to see. Also, we want to provide some flexibility in how you present that information. And we understand that sometimes that can lead to confusion. But again, I can't stress enough, make sure you keep these awards and gear your follow-up reports, whether it's the 5-year interim report or the progress report, to the award. And we'll be getting to kind of how the award looks in a progress report in a bit. The other thing I want to echo is that when Dale said programs, even if programs have perfect outcomes and like 100% across the board, which means your program's killing it, and that's great. Standard 2, while we focus a lot on the assessment, the other part of that is continual quality improvement, meaning that we require you to make changes, find a way for your program to be better, and then assess whether those changes worked or not. So again, I'm glad Dale brought that up because I have talked to program directors who have gotten a little confused and make the assumption that if their outcomes are great, they don't have to change anything. And we're not looking for seismic changes, obviously, but again, philosophically, we don't ever really think that there's a perfect program, because as we've seen over the past 18 months, what expectations of the professional medical laboratory scientists have been changing. Everything is fluid to a certain extent, so we want to see programs that are being proactive in trying to continually improve that program.
Mark, can I add just a couple things? One of the things, I love the new format, and largely because, like you said, doing math, looking at just reading these progress reports, I'm like, okay, there's one due in 5 years, but it's a little bit more nebulous than the old format. So I really like the new format.
Yeah.
The other thing to say, I'd mentioned that, I will contact the program directors if something's not clear on the progress report, but program directors also contact us, the discipline leads, which Mark will show at the end of the presentation, and just ask questions on, how do I put this together? I've never put together a 5-year report, and for a lot of programs, that's true. So, we're there to help you prepare the report, not just review the report after it's done.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you mentioned that, because we have some information on how to prepare the report. We have recently put together a template for the 5-year interim report that is available on the NAACLS website. If you go to the program directors page on the right-hand side, where you find the standards and standards compliance guide and guide to accreditation, there's also a link to documents. And once you go into that documents link, you find some items that maybe aren't so commonly used. And specifically templates for submitting the interim report and the progress report can be found there. So yeah, a few final items on the interim report. Carrie, I do see your question. We'll get to that a bit in the Q&A. RCAP are the only reviews these reports twice a year. Since PARC only has a 5-year maximum continuing award, there is no kind of interim report for PARC programs. So if you only have a phlebotomy program, you don't have to worry about, and you have a 5-year award, you don't have to worry about submitting a report every 5 years. We're just going to look at your outcomes on the annual survey of programs. And an unsatisfactory interim report could result in a progress report. And those, obviously, there isn't a standard progress report when it comes to these kind of things. Those vary by programs, and it's really about what the concerns are about the specific program. Okay, let's go into progress reports, which are actually, now that I think of it, I think interim reports are actually more common because we've seen a lot of 10-year awards coming through. But let's talk about progress reports. So there are 2 kinds of progress reports. There is the initial progress report, which you see here. And then there are progress reports due to citations. All initial programs need to submit follow-up information on their outcomes and their assessment. Programs don't really have outcomes if they're initial programs. For MLS, even when we switched to the 2012 standards and they focus on assessment, it was decided that even if the program had been around for 3 to 5 years before being NAACLS accredited, since we could not confirm they were upholding the NAACLS standards, their outcomes may not tell us a lot. We want to see your outcomes as you've been maintaining and operating under the standards. So what you see here on the left again is what a initial progress report will look like. We want information about standard 2B and we want information about standard 2C. And those are required about 3 years after your initial award. And then we also have progress reports that are due based on citations. And this is kind of, again, where we come back about deciphering your award and like looking at the information we're giving you. So a large part of the committee work that Dale was discussing was reviewing the self-study review form, the self-study review response, the site visit report, and the site visit report response. And then our committee members decide, are there outstanding issues that transition from a concern to a citation? And if there is a citation, what is the exact issue with the citation. So all program awards that have citations, you will see the standard listed in just because everything has to tie back to the standard, the rationale of why the citation is there, and then the recommendation of how to comply with that standard. We try to make these as specific as possible, but then with these being program awards, we need some, and very official documents, we need some consistency across the whole board. But something with standard 2C in the recommendation is pretty cut and dry. But if you have problems with affiliation agreements, for example, there will be often, if it's a problem with a specific affiliation agreement, we try hard to say which affiliation agreement we have concerns about so you're not left guessing what kind of where you have to address the problem. So Dale, again, I'm sure I know you have reviewed progress reports probably at least twice a year. What are some commonalities of reviewing those progress reports, and what tips do you have for maybe putting together a progress report when obviously it's probably a stressful situation because programs want to avoid being put on probation?
Absolutely. So nobody wants a citation, obviously, but they do occur. And as Mark had pointed out, a lot of these citations are dealing with assessment. And so if you're not an expert at assessment, which many of us are not, I certainly was not when I was a program director of my program, but universities typically have an assessment office or an assessment officer that can help you with these items. And one of the nice things with these reports is that, when you do have the citation, it tells you exactly what that citation is, why that citation was listed. And then the RATs and RECs, which again, the rationales and recommendations, are a published document that we have available to us to say, this is why, and this is how you can fix that. So if that's not clear, if our recommendation is something where, okay, you say I don't have this, but how do I get this? How do I manage that? Again, I think that's more of a conversation with your discipline lead person. Contact NAACLS, contact the volunteer that's working with them, and say, what can I do to meet this this recommendation so that the next time it's reviewed, I've met this citation, I've met the requirements of the citation. So yeah, unfortunately, we do get a few of these awards that aren't for the full time period due to citations, and like I said, largely standard 2, but there are other things too. If there's not publications, certain publications like standard 4 requires a bunch of publications, and if they're not present and they haven't been present along, those are something typically you can fix fairly easily because it's something you can put on your website or something that you can make available. But like you said, assessment, doing your assessment and what kind of assessment you're actually doing and does it meet the requirements of the standard, it can be a lot trickier. So did I address your question, Mark? I wasn't quite sure if I.
Yeah. I don't know if you've had. I mean, to be honest, we don't run into a lot of. It is a rare occasion for a NAACLS program to be put on probation due to an unsatisfactory progress report. It may happen once every 3 or 4 years. And I think that's largely because we try to be very clear in the award, as you're seeing here, the expectations of what we want in the progress report. We don't need to see the whole self-study again. And matter of fact, don't send us the whole self-study again. You only have to supply the items we're looking for. Once we've seen it, we're good. We're ready to move on, and we know you're ready to move on. So it's always helpful to remember, I think, as program directors, that ultimately our review committees and most of our board of directors are made up of program directors. So they know that they have to adhere by the policies and procedures and standards that they help develop. So again, with similar to the, another thing to help remind everybody is in the progress report, you will receive a progress report review, and you will have, similar to the self-study, one opportunity to respond to that review before it goes to the committee, and it's they determine whether it's compliant or not. Honestly, a lot of the progress reports I see, those items are satisfied in the actual progress report, so there is rarely a response necessary. But again, to kind of hopefully ease everybody's minds of the people on this call or who's watching this later who may have a progress report due, you will receive a review of your progress report. And if there are outstanding concerns on that progress report, you will be provided one opportunity to respond to that progress report, similar to self-studies.
The other part of that, Mark, too,
yeah.
Mark, just a quick addendum to that. When we're reviewing these progress reports, we're volunteers, we go through them, and sometimes we have quite a few of them, not just progress reports, but other forms that we're also doing as well for NAACLS. But if you don't hear from us while we're producing it, that generally means that you've addressed the issue and that we're just submitting that it is satisfactory. And while we won't get back to you, NAACLS will certainly get back to you after their meeting. But if you have any questions, again, feel free to reach out to us and let us know, I submitted my progress report. I haven't heard anything yet. Can you update me?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, there's so much going on behind the scenes that program objectives may not be seen. Just to echo what Dale said, always feel free to touch base with us and be like, hey, I haven't heard from you from a while. What's going on? And we're happy to let you know as much as we can. We don't share a lot of deliberative items, but we at least can let you know where you're in the process and kind of when you can expect to hear an official response. Okay, so for kind of a awkward transition, let's talk about NAACLS at CLEC 2022. Doesn't have a lot to do with progress reports and interim reports, I understand. And if you have questions about those items, you can still shoot those. We'll have a Q&A session after this. But we have a lot of stuff going on at CLEC this year. And I wanted to promote that because it's been a while since we have had the opportunity to see each other, especially those going in person. So I want to make sure to let everybody know about those in-person opportunities, also the opportunities we're extending for those attending virtually. First is the NAACLS workshop. I won't spend a lot of time on this because we've already closed registration, but if you are signed up for the workshop, you should be receiving your handout, I think by the end of the day today. If you don't receive it by tomorrow afternoon, touch base with staff. And same thing with the login information. You should be receiving that, I'm guessing, before noon tomorrow. So if it's tomorrow afternoon and you still haven't got your login information for the workshop, shoot an email over to staff. Just as a reminder, the workshop has a separate registration process than the regular CLEC. So just because you sign up for CLEC does not mean you will receive access to the workshop. It's a whole different registration and costs and things of that nature. Coffee with NAACLS. We did we did a virtual version of this last year, but this was actually the idea of Coffee with NAACLS came about in a more face-to-face context, which we then had to adapt to virtual last year. So anybody who jumped on Coffee with NAACLS last year may remember it was very much like a Q&A with like a panel of experts. Or the face-to-face will be much more kind of a informal, relaxed nature. We do have staff will be there. We have members of our review committees, but we want to focus on maybe more one-on-one interactions than just sitting down and listening to a QA session. So we're gonna have some coffee there. We're gonna have some pastries, so only available as long as they last, but we should have a lot of coffee. If you have a question on Tuesday before CLEC kicks in, come down and see us. If you don't want to have a question and you just want to say hi, that's completely okay too. Actually, I encourage you to do that. So it's supposed to be very social and a way for all of us just to say hello to each other. And then if there are any lingering NAACLS questions, we'd be happy to take care of those too. The NAACLS update is, I should mention that the Coffee with NAACLS is in person only. We do not have, because of the nature of it, we don't have a hybrid version of that. But we do have a hybrid version of the NAACLS update. I do not have that. That time is wrong, so don't pay attention to that. Please reference the CLEC app. I apologize for the wrong time on that, but you will want to make sure you find that time on the CLEC app, because there are some significant policy announcements that I encourage you to be aware of. If you miss the CLEC update, or the NAACLS update, we will try to see if we can get a hold of that video from the ASCLS if it's available at a different time. If it isn't, a lot of the items covered at the NAACLS update will be part of the president's report, which will be appearing on the NAACLS news probably a week from Thursday. So we'll get the information to you one way or another, but I do encourage you to attend the NAACLS update in person or the hybrid. And the NAACLS booths, these is something that we will be providing for those in person and those attending virtually. So we will have a booth where all the other booths are at. I believe that's in the posters, but I mean, there'll be more information. I'm sure it'll be very clear where all the booths will be at once we all get to Denver. So what you see here are the times that NAACLS will have people available to their booth. You also will see the times that the hybrid booth will be available. So the hybrid booth is only available by appointment. And hopefully if I worked our blog correctly, I scheduled a post to be released at the same time Doctors NAACLS started. And with that post, you can find all the same information about NAACLS events at CLEC, but also the link to sign up for a 15-minute virtual booth slot. And that will give you the opportunity. If you have a question or something for NAACLS staff, we can make ourselves available in 15-minute increments. This is a way for us to kind of compensate for the fact that we couldn't really make the Coffee with NAACLS virtual. So that was real quick. I know I want to leave time for question and answers. And as I said, all these details are available in the NAACLS news. So with that, let's go to a general Q&A. Here are the discipline lead people that Dale referenced before. These are our experts in standards. Any questions about process should really go to staff. And if you're not sure whether your question is process-based or whether your question is standard-based, I would recommend approaching staff first, since we are the ones getting paid. The people you see here are our volunteers who we do appreciate giving up their time and contributing their expertise to these matters. So one more thing to kind of clarify a bit on something Dale said. Let's say, for example, you have a progress report. You got a citation on standard 2. If you have questions about standard 2 and kind of the interpretation of that standard, absolutely approach your discipline lead person. However, the DLPs are not there to maybe give your whole progress report as a whole a once over and to see if it's in good shape or not. That veers a little too close on consulting, and then there's conflict of interest issues. So again, just so you kind of know the expectations of our DLPs, they are there to assist with standard interpretation, maybe not so much with, hey, can you review my self-study real quick before I turn it in? So with that, let's go to Q&A. And we do have one question. And I'll read this off. If anybody else has a question, go ahead and feel free to type it into the Q&A chat box or raise your hand and we will enable your audio. So for the interim report, should we attach graduate and employer surveys or just include that discussion within the document? So I think they want to know what kind of documentation, if any, has to be included in the interim report itself.
Yeah, Carrie, I would say just the discussion of what those employer surveys showed. So you don't have to include the instrument that you use to collect this information. I have had people submit that though. Again, there's a lot of variation in what's actually submitted during the 5-year report. But in general, we don't need the entire survey. We just need the results of the survey, any trends that they identified through that survey, and especially things that you could use to improve your program outcomes. So again, it comes back to the assessment piece is the more important part than the actual tool itself.
Okay, thank you, Dale. Michelle's question, and I can take this. My last award letter only indicates, and Russ, please correct me if I'm wrong on this. My last award letter only indicates the expiration of the accreditation award and the due date of the next self-study. There is no mention of the interim report due date. Where can I find this information? I would recommend contacting staff. Since I do work with park programs, I don't write the letters that say you have a 10-year award. This is when your reports are due. Russ, off the top of your head, do you know in the old letters we used to do before we transitioned to this current format with the tables, was the 5-year interim report information included, or were they contacted at a later time?
Yeah, it was just underneath that table that is now in our letters. It's underneath that. The paragraph should say year 5 interim with the due date, where they put the progress report as well somewhere.
Okay. Let me go back and see if I can get it.
I don't know if she had a, I mean, she said my last award letter. I don't know if you had a 10-year, if you didn't get a 10-year award letter, then it wouldn't be on there because there is no interim report. Yeah.
So I'm going back to what that letter would look like. So obviously this is in the new format, but you're saying, Russ, that it's usually included if in letters that don't contain this box down here.
Yeah, okay. There'd be actually there's a paragraph underneath the 10 years, it'd be year 5 interim. And then obviously it goes into explanation, but yes, it should be. Okay.
If for some reason you can't find that, Michelle, please just contact staff. We have those dates in our database, and we would be happy to share that with you and, drop it in an email just so you have that in writing as well. Thanks, Russ. Any other questions? Okay, I'm sorry if I missed this, but will NAACLS send a form to fill out for a progress report due for an initial program? So we have a template available in our documents section on our website. You get to our documents section by here. Let me just screen sharing. So I might as well just bring up a screen. So let's go to NAACLS.org. So if you go to program directors, so this little resource bar, we try to highlight probably the most used documents, but if you try to highlight here, you find a bunch of stuff. So basically, if you just search by title right here, you'll be able to find a ton of find templates. You'll be able to find, for those who have been on a workshop, one of these Dr. NAACLS before a workshop, and we say, we make our self-study review forms and site visit reports, blank forms available to our program directors. Here's where you can find those as well. So if you can't find the template here, again, feel free to contact staff and we can supply that to you. Oh, good question from Phyllis. Dale, get ready. Is there such a thing as being too lengthy in the narrative for the interim report?
Great question, Phyllis. No, although again, we like to see the pertinent information that we really need to access right up in the front. So one of the best formats that I see for these 5-year reports is that they have their standard 2 measures. They have their outcome measures listed in a table format usually, and they show them for the 5-year reporting range. And then it clearly makes it very, very easy to find that information and to access it. And then in your narrative, then you go into your assessment, what type of assessment you're doing, where you got the information in the assessment. And again, we've emphasized employer feedback and graduate student feedback, but there's also advisory committee feedback, there's faculty feedback, current student feedback. There's lots of other things that you can use in your assessment. And that's what we want to see, is that you've used these and then, a popular term is closing the loop. So you did the assessment, you identified something that could be improved. You made a change, and then you assess that change to see if it resulted in either better outcomes or just more satisfaction from your students or from your employers. Those 4 things are important as part of that assessment. And then after that, I've seen 5-page interim reports. I've seen 70-page interim reports because they just threw everything in there that they were using. And I'm not going to say that that's a bad thing. I'm just going to say that a lot of it is stuff that we might skim through, looking for the pertinent stuff that we're actually looking for.
Yeah, I can, and I know this is, I don't know how much this will help, but I do remember when the committees and the board were discussing the 5-year interim reports, and it was never intended to be a miniature self-study. And we all know about the time and work that we ask you to put into standard 2 on the self-study. So I guess use that information as you will. I mean, I would assume there's a reason we're not asking for documentation in the 5-year interim report. We're asking for narratives. So again, we want to, it's kind of the drawback of wanting to provide programs flexibility, is that there's only so much we can tell you about when to stop, because then you err on becoming too prescriptive in other ways. So, but I think Dale's experience of when he's had to skim versus when he's had to read is probably a good one.
I'd also, oh, sorry, Mark.
Go ahead, Dale.
Just a follow up to that too, is that, you know, the information that we're looking for, again, it's not the only, we'll certainly read the other side. You know, there's a lot of things, you're very proud of your programs. You know, there's a lot of information in those program reports. But if we're missing something, if there's something that has to go into our report and we can't find it, we will contact you.
Okay. Thank you, Dale. So Leslie offers an FYI. FYI, my award letter has the text about the 5-year interim report deadline on the second page of the letter. So, so yeah, maybe it's on a separate page that you just didn't see. And again, if you can't find it, feel free to contact us and we'll let you know. Okay, if you currently have an undergraduate CLS BS program and that is NAACLS accredited, and you are thinking of starting an MS in CLS, what documentation needs to be sent to NAACLS? It's a good question. So NAACLS does not have a specific process for master's level MLS programs. We depend on, you still have to meet the entry level competencies. But we depend on kind of the inter-university and state level review to determine whether the quality of the content is of master's level. So we don't have a separate set of entry level competencies for master's level MLS. That's kind of why the doctoral program is quite a bit different, because we do have different expectations of doctoral individuals. So what kind of information needs to be sent to NAACLS? I would notify us that you're thinking about this to happen or it has happened. And obviously when you are filling out I don't have the language in front of me, so I don't think the 5-year interim asks for major changes, but we do ask for major changes on the annual survey programs. Obviously add that for annual survey programs. I would start including that information. I would start building your assessment on that right away and start tracking that. So when you hit the self-study, you have a year of assessment materials ready. So you can, when you start providing narratives for your self-study and you start talking, explaining about your program and maybe talking about how you've entered or started an MLS path, you start talking about those assessment methods and maybe how you assess. And Dale, please correct me if I'm wrong, because when I start talking about reviewing standard 2, I get a little over my skis, but like just knowing the committees, I would guess they're going to want to see how you would assess a master's level program, possibly different than a bachelor's degree program.
Exactly. And that I think is a little bit more for the Higher Learning Commission to assess, you know, the changes that you're doing, because your outcome measures, your you know, the material that you're teaching to your students, that's not going to change significantly. So the master's level courses are going to have some additional master's requirements. It's going to be a little tougher, obviously. It's going to require more. And so that's largely, I think, handled more on the university level and in conjunction with the Higher Learning Commission. But again, you're still meeting the NAACLS standards. You're still, it is a major change, but you know, your standards don't change at all.
Yeah, and Jeannie, just to kind of, I kind of got rambly there. To put a fine point on it, there is no form or report or anything that is required by NAACLS to start a doctoral level. We'd like to know. So like an email is nice that, hey, we're planning on doing this, or hey, we've started accepting students on this, but there is no like something akin to the transfer of sponsorship report where you have to, you know, fill out a bunch of information. These are the kind of items that we really try to stay out of your hair and depend on what Dale said earlier, groups like HLC and stuff like that to do what they do. And we're not going to make you repeat that work. So Gene, I hope that answered your question. If Dale had other advice that he wanted to offer you and doesn't jump back on this call, we will have him email you. I'm sure you're in our database. So were there any other questions that Russ and I can take care of now as we see if Dale tries to jump back on? Seeing none, we will go ahead and end this call. Thank you to everybody who jumped on and joined us today. Thank you. If you're a volunteer out there and you were listening, thank you for volunteering. We couldn't be doing any of the NAACLS work without our volunteers, and we can't say it enough. So also, if you're going to be face-to-face at CLEC and you're attending in person, please come and find us a Coffee with NAACLS or the booth so we can say hi, introduce ourselves, even if you have a question or not. And with that, everybody have a good day.